The Gospel of Thomas.
Woke up to a whisper from the void, searching through shadows of chasing truths. The road is long but rewarded by gnosis and good fruits. The Logos leads me home, and this is the divine truth.
Many blessings, all you fantastic wonders, truth seekers and light bringers, and welcome back to the channel Spiritual Level Wellbeing, where you have a spiritual level wellbeing. And today we're going to be discussing the Gospel of Thomas, its history, its discovery, and whether or not this text was written while Jesus was still alive, and its impact on the modern world. And we will discuss whether or not this text is the oldest Christian text, as this Gospel of Thomas has caused the spark of rebirth, debate and controversy for centuries. So if you like subjects such as this, like and subscribe and leave a comment when this video is done. So let's get started. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the most powerful, intriguing and mysterious texts from early Christianity, though it was not included into the Church's canon, which is now known as the New Testament. This text is often discussed in academic circles and by those who study ancient Christian writings and ancient Christianity. So where does this Gospel of Thomas come from, and when was it discovered? Well, let's start with the most famous version, the Coptic Gospel of Thomas. In 1945, near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a peasant discovered a buried jar filled with ancient papyri. This discovery would become one of the most significant archaeological finds for the history of ancient Christian studies. Among the scrolls discovered was the Coptic Gospel of Thomas, dating back to the 4th century, but its contents are much older indeed. Now, while the Nag Hammadi Coptic version of the Gospel of Thomas is the most complete discovered version, earlier Greek fragments were discovered, and it was thanks to the Coptic version that scholars became aware that the earlier Greek fragments were indeed the Gospel of Thomas. Now, the oldest discovered fragment is the Oxyrhynchus 5575 papyrus, known as the Greek Gospel of Thomas, discovered between 1896 to 1907 in Egypt. This text dates between the 1st or 2nd century AD, copied from an even older original text, possibly written during Jesus' own lifetime. Well, what's inside of the Gospel of Thomas? Well, it's a collection of sayings of Jesus. These sayings do not contain a birth story or miracles or a resurrection story, which leads scholars to come to the conclusion that this text is earlier, as it focuses central on the Jesus message, his sayings. Now, this also leads scholars to believe that this is the raw, unfiltered message of Jesus that does not contain the later church edits and interpretations, and thus was rejected from the church's canon as it did not align with their message. So here's the big question. Could the Gospel of Thomas be the earliest Christian text? Many scholars believe that the Gospel of Thomas predates the canonical New Testament Gospels. Now, if we look at the way the four Gospels are structured versus the Gospel of Thomas, which includes no birth story, passion narrative, miracles, or resurrection, this suggests that the Gospel of Thomas comes from an earlier stage of Christian thought, possibly before other stories became central to Christianity. The canon also includes later 4th and 5th century edits and add-ins, making this text more reliable. So, is it possible that the Gospel of Thomas was written during the time that Jesus was still alive? Well, there's some strong, fascinating theories that highly suggest yes, and support this in a way that the mainstream Christian canon cannot. Now, if this text was based on the sayings of Jesus passed down in oral tradition, then yes, it could have been written during Jesus' lifetime or immediately after his death. Now remember, the New Testament Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, were written decades after the events they describe. But if the Gospel of Thomas was written earlier, it represents a window to the historical Jesus and his own words. Now, another strong indication that this text was written during Jesus' own lifetime or immediately after his death is the dating of the Greek fragment of the Gospel of Thomas, which dates possibly to 20 to 60 AD being the earliest. This makes this text being written 10 to 50 years after the death of Jesus. Now, if this copy was copied from an earlier Gospel of Thomas, which it was, then yes, it is highly possible that this text was written while Jesus was still alive, which would back up the beginning text. These are the words of the living Jesus. The Gospel of Thomas is often associated with Gnostic Christianity, a philosophical, spiritual, and religious movement that focuses on esoteric knowledge for salvation. This belief was widespread throughout many movements of ancient Christianity. Many of the sayings of the Gospel of Thomas reflect Gnostic themes and teachings, though some scholars argue whether this text should be classified as Gnostic Christian or simply just early Christian with mystical elements. One of the most intriguing aspects of this text, which is the Gospel of Thomas, which leans towards Jesus being a mystic, and this text, which does lean towards Gnosticism, is especially found within the opening text. Whoever finds the interpretations of these sayings will not experience death. This suggests a focus on inner transformation rather than a physical resurrection. Now, many scholars argue that the Gospel of Thomas reflects an earlier Christian community that didn't fully align with what would become Christian orthodoxy, and that the Gospel of Thomas was rejected from the New Testament because it did not fit the narrative that the early church leaders were trying to establish. So, what does this all mean for the Gospel of Thomas? Does this mean that this text is the oldest Christian text? Very likely, yes. And until we find more discoveries, we may never know. Now, does this also suggest that this text could have been written during Jesus' lifetime and possibly even just after his crucifixion or after his death? Very well, yes, there's a possibility. We may never 100% know though. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment as it helps this channel grow. Have a lovely day, a lovely night, and God bless.